The morning I became queen began with white roses, dozens of them, filling every corner of our cramped townhouse like offerings at a funeral. Rain hammered the windows, water streaming down the glass like the tears gathering behind my eyes that I refused to let fall. My wedding day. My 18th birthday. The day I stopped belonging to myself. Hold still, Aurora. My stepmother's voice cut through the silence as she jerked the corset laces so tight my lungs burned. Her icy fingers worked through my silver blonde hair with an unusual softness that felt more menacing than her typical cruelty. You almost look worthy of attention. The dress was ivory silk, impossibly delicate. It had belonged to my mother, salvaged from the single trunk of her belongings that remained after my father remarried. Against my throat rested a small pendant, tarnished silver shaped like a wolf's head with amber eyes. Wear this always, my mother had whispered during her final days. 7 years before cancer claimed her, before my father found a replacement, before he too vanished from my life, leaving me trapped with a woman who saw me as currency. The mirror reflected someone I barely recognized. Hollow cheeks, colorless skin, eyes too large for my gaunt face. I could almost hear my mother's voice drifting through memory. Some things break, Aurora. Others bend until they're stronger than steel. The wolf pendant caught the dim light. I pressed my fingers against it, drawing courage from its familiar weight. Remember what we agreed, my stepmother murmured, quiet enough that her daughter, my stepsister Celeste, wouldn't overhear from the next room. You marry King Alexander. You secure his protection for us. For Celeste. Always Celeste. The golden child with her cascade of dark curls and calculating green eyes. The daughter who deserved everything while I deserved nothing. His condition makes him volatile, my stepmother continued, smoothing invisible creases from my skirt. Unpredictable. The attack that paralyzed him changed him. The council needs him settled, needs an heir. They don't particularly care which minor noble's daughter they sacrifice. Her lips twisted into something resembling a smile. And you've always been expendable. My hand closed around the pendant. Stronger than steel, I told myself. Bend, don't shatter. A sharp knock preceded Celeste's entrance. She swept in wearing sapphire blue that made her look like royalty already, her assessing gaze traveling over me with poorly disguised disdain. Well, you certainly look interesting. The crippled king and the forgotten daughter. How poetic. I remained silent. Words were weapons I couldn't afford. Not when my silence had been purchased with threats against the servants who'd shown me kindness after father died. Not when refusal meant homelessness for all of us, even Celeste, though she'd never believe her mother would let that happen. The carriage has arrived, Celeste announced, barely containing her excitement. Why wouldn't she be thrilled? With me gone, married into royalty, she'd be free to pursue any wealthy suitor without competition from a plain stepsister. My stepmother's fingers bit into my arm. Remember, Aurora. Smile. Be agreeable. Do whatever he demands. Her nails left crescents in my skin. Whatever it takes. The journey passed in a haze of mud-splattered roads and oppressive quiet. My stepmother and Celeste chattered endlessly about leveraging our new royal connection. I watched the landscape disappear behind us, memorizing every tree, every hill of the only home I'd known. The pendant grew warm against my skin as the palace materialized through the rain. Stone towers pierced the thunderous sky like arrows aimed at heaven. Guards in crimson and gold lined the entrance, their faces blank as carved stone as our carriage halted. The entrance hall consumed us. Enormous, frigid despite countless candles and tapestries showing battles won by long-dead kings. I shivered, feeling invisible eyes tracking my every movement. Lady Aurora Winterbourne. A severe woman with steel-gray hair approached us. I am Lady Margaret, head of the royal household. We've been expecting you. Her gaze dismissed my stepmother and Celeste entirely. The family may wait here. You will accompany me to meet His Majesty. My stepmother's grip on my wrist turned vicious. Remember our agreement, she hissed, her nails drawing blood. I nodded mutely, then followed Lady Margaret through corridors that grew more elaborate with each turn. My heart thundered against my compressed ribs as we approached massive oak doors flanked by scarred guards. The king has been informed, Lady Margaret said, pausing. Something like sympathy flickered across her features. He has expectations. What kind? My voice emerged barely audible, The first words I'd spoken all day. Loyalty. Obedience. Silence when necessary. She adjusted my collar with impersonal efficiency. He was different before the attack. 5 years in chairs and beds haven't improved his temperament. Why me? The question escaped before I could stop it. Lady Margaret's expression remained unreadable. The king chooses for his own reasons. We don't question them. She hesitated, then added, "Be careful. He's lost the use of his legs, not his ability to destroy those who disappoint him." The doors swung open before I could respond. The royal chamber drowned in shadows, heavy curtains blocking daylight, fire providing the only illumination. At first I saw only shapes: the massive bed, floor-to-ceiling bookcases, a desk covered in maps. Then my eyes adjusted and I saw him. King Alexander Thornwood, ruler of Silvercrest, sat in a wheelchair of black wood and silver near the fire. At 34, he was older than I'd expected, though his face retained a harsh beauty that rumors hadn't exaggerated. Dark hair fell across his forehead, slightly too long, as if he dismissed anyone who suggested cutting it. His shoulders, broad and powerful, strained against a partially unlaced black shirt. Only the stillness of his legs beneath a dark throw betrayed his condition. His eyes found mine across the room, ice blue with flecks of silver, reflecting firelight like a wolf's in darkness. Something cold and calculating lived in that gaze, measuring my worth and finding it lacking in seconds. "So this is the offering," he said, his voice deeper than I'd imagined, smooth as aged wine despite the bitterness in his words. "Come closer. Let me see what I'm being forced to accept." Lady Margaret nudged me forward. My legs moved mechanically until I stood before him, close enough to see the stubble darkening his jaw, to catch the scent of pine and something wilder, more dangerous. "Your Majesty." I attempted a curtsy that felt awkward under his scrutiny. He studied me with detached interest, then his hand shot out, fingers catching my chin in a grip firm enough to startle but not harm. "They claimed you were plain," he mused, turning my face toward the firelight. "I suppose by conventional standards that's accurate. But there's something in the eyes." His thumb brushed my lower lip, the touch sending an unwanted shiver through me. "Tell me, Aurora Winterbourne, do you know why you're here?" "To marry you, Your Majesty." The words tasted like ashes. A cold smile curved his lips. "Yes, but do you know why you specifically? Why not your stepsister, the beautiful dark-haired one I was originally offered?" My heart stuttered. This information was news to me. "I don't. Your stepmother thinks me a fool," he continued, releasing my chin to wheel toward a table bearing crystal decanters. "She thinks a paralyzed king is desperate enough to accept any girl thrust before him." He poured amber liquid with practiced ease. "What she fails to understand is that my condition has made me more observant, not less." He took a slow sip, eyes never leaving mine. "I chose you, Aurora Winterbourne, not the other way around." The room tilted beneath my feet. "Why?" "Because when I sent representatives to evaluate potential brides, you were the only one who helped a servant who dropped a tray. The only one who assisted an elderly gardener when no one watched." His gaze intensified. "The only one who didn't look at my emissary with disgust when he mentioned my paralysis." I remembered that day, the royal representatives visiting while my stepmother paraded Celeste before them. I'd been relegated to serving refreshments, invisible as always. "Tomorrow you become my wife," he stated matter-of-factly. "You become queen. Your family receives the protection and status they desire." He wheeled closer until his knees nearly touched my dress. "And in return you belong to me completely. Do you understand?" I swallowed hard. "I believe so, Your Majesty." "No," he said softly, dangerously. "You don't. But you will." He reached out again, his fingers finding the wolf pendant. Something flashed in his eyes, recognition, surprise. "An interesting piece," he murmured, releasing it as though burned. "Leave now. Rest. Tomorrow comes quickly." Lady Margaret materialized beside me, guiding me toward the door. As we reached the threshold, the king's voice stopped us. "Aurora." I turned, finding his gaze locked on mine across the dimly lit chamber. "I may be broken," he said, his voice carrying an edge that raised goosebumps along my arms. "But I am far from powerless. Remember that before you consider following your stepsister's footsteps of deception. The doors closed with a sound like a coffin lid falling shut. Lady Margaret led me through silent corridors to my temporary chambers, a luxurious prison where I'd spend my last night as Aurora Winterbourne before becoming Queen Aurora Thornwood, wife to a king whose eyes held secrets as dark as the shadows surrounding him. As the door closed behind Lady Margaret, I clutched my mother's pendant, pressing my forehead against the cool window glass. Rain continued falling, washing away the world I'd known. Tomorrow I'd become queen to a broken king who'd chosen me for reasons I couldn't fathom. Tomorrow I'd step into a life I hadn't chosen but couldn't refuse. Stronger than steel, I reminded myself as a single tear escaped. "Bend, don't shatter." Sleep eluded me that night, leaving me to wander the vast chamber like a ghost. The bed remained untouched, its silk sheets too soft for skin accustomed to threadbare cotton. Outside, the storm intensified, lightning occasionally illuminating the unfamiliar luxury surrounding me. Carved furniture, tapestries depicting ancient battles, a silver brush set I didn't dare touch. When dawn finally broke, pale and hesitant through lingering clouds, servants entered without knocking. 6 women with downcast eyes and efficient hands drew a bath scented with lavender, laid out undergarments of fabric so fine it felt like betrayal, and presented a wedding gown that made my mother's dress look like a servant's rags. "The king commissioned it specially," explained the eldest servant, her salt and pepper hair twisted severely. "He was most particular about the details." I stared at the creation. Champagne silk embroidered with silver thread, crystals cascading down the bodice like frozen rain. Not white, the traditional color of purity, but a shade that whispered of moonlight and secrets. The dress my mother had lovingly preserved hadn't been deemed worthy. "What happened to my dress?" I asked, voice barely audible. "Lady Margaret had it stored safely," the woman replied, understanding crossing her weathered features. "She said you might want it afterward. After I became property instead of person. After I traded my name, my body, my future for the protection of a family that had never protected me." The bathwater cooled as I sat motionless, fingertips tracing circles on the surface. The servants washed my hair with gentle efficiency, applying oils that smelled of jasmine and something deeper, more primal. One brushed my silver blonde locks until they gleamed like moonlight, arranging them in an intricate style that left my neck feeling vulnerable. The dress weighed heavier than it should, settling on my shoulders like shackles of silk and expectation. As they fastened the final buttons, I caught my reflection in the full-length mirror. A stranger stared back, ethereal and untouchable. The wolf pendant at my throat was the only familiar aspect. A knock heralded Lady Margaret's arrival. She dismissed the servants, then circled me with critical eyes. "You'll do," she concluded, adjusting a stray curl. "The ceremony begins in 1 hour. Your family awaits in the antechamber. Do you wish to see them?" I hesitated, then nodded. Despite everything, some childish part of me still craved a kind word before stepping into the unknown. My stepmother and Celeste swept in moments later, their expressions shifting from practiced solemnity to poorly disguised shock. "Well," my stepmother breathed, touching my sleeve. "It seems His Majesty has spared no expense." Celeste circled me like a hawk. "I hardly recognize you, Aurora. Almost beautiful in this light." Her smile didn't reach her eyes, though I can't imagine why He chose you over me. "Celeste," my stepmother cut in sharply. "Mind yourself." An uncomfortable silence fell, broken only by distant activity. Servants rushing, guards calling orders, the palace preparing for its first royal wedding in decades. "The king mentioned something strange yesterday," I said quietly, watching their faces. "He said he was originally offered Celeste." My stepmother's face hardened. "Nonsense. The arrangement was always for you." He seemed quite certain. "Well, he's mistaken. Perhaps his mind is as broken as his body." I touched the pendant. "Or perhaps you offered Celeste first. But when you learned of his condition, you decided to sacrifice me instead." The slap came swift and sharp, her ring catching my cheek. Pain bloomed bright and immediate. "You ungrateful child," she hissed, eyes darting to ensure no one witnessed. "After everything we've done for you, what have you done for me?" I asked, the words escaping before I could reconsider. Besides treat me like a servant in my father's home? Besides take everything he left me. We gave you a roof, food. My inheritance paid for both, I countered, a lifetime of swallowed words suddenly rising. And now you've sold me to a king you believe is damaged to secure Celeste's future. My stepmother's face paled, then flushed with anger. You have no idea what you're talking about. This match is an honor. Then why not give it to your own daughter? Celeste stepped between us, her expression calculating. Because the king asked for you, she said smoothly, adjusting my pendant with false sisterly concern. Specifically you, after the delegation visited. Her fingers lingered on the silver wolf. Curious, isn't it? Perhaps he saw something in you we've all missed. My stepmother's lips pressed into a thin line. Regardless of how it came about, you have a duty to fulfill. Remember our agreement. I remember, I said. The mark on my cheek throbbed. You've made it impossible to forget. A clock chimed somewhere in the palace. My stepmother launched into last-minute adjustments. Stand straight. Smile. Don't embarrass us. Never me, never my father. Always the invaders who'd claimed his home, his name, and now his daughter. Ladies, Lady Margaret appeared at the doorway, her expression revealing nothing. It's time. My stepmother squeezed my arm once, hard enough to bruise. Do not disappoint us. They departed in a rustle of expensive fabric, leaving me alone with Lady Margaret, who approached with something concealed in her palm. For the mark, she explained, applying cool cream to my stinging cheek with impersonal efficiency. We can't have the bride appearing damaged. Is that what I am now? I asked softly. Damaged goods. Her hands stilled, eyes meeting mine with unexpected directness. We are all damaged in some way, Lady Aurora. The question is whether we let those damages define us. She stepped back, assessing her work. The king bears his scars visibly. You've learned to hide yours. Perhaps that's why he chose you. Before I could respond, she placed a delicate tiara on my head. Silver vines intertwined with tiny diamonds that caught the light like trapped stars. This belonged to his mother, Lady Margaret explained. He insisted you wear it today. The weight of royal history settled uncomfortably as we proceeded through corridors lined with silent guards. The great hall had been transformed. Flowers cascaded from stone archways. Candles illuminated stained glass that cast rainbow patterns across assembled nobility. Music swelled from hidden musicians. At the far end, flanked by stern-faced advisors, waited King Alexander. He wore formal black with silver embroidery matching my gown, the royal crown resting on his dark hair. Even seated, he dominated the space, his presence commanding attention, respect, fear. Our eyes met across the expanse of polished stone and watching eyes. Something passed between us, recognition, perhaps understanding. We were both trapped in this moment, though for vastly different reasons. The ceremony passed in a blur of ancient words and solemn promises. I spoke when prompted, my voice steady despite the trembling in my core. The king's responses came deep and clear, betraying no emotion. When he slid a ring onto my finger, silver set with a stone that shifted from blue to purple in the light. His touch lingered longer than necessary, warm against my cold skin. With this ring I claim you as mine, he added, deviating from traditional vows. In body, mind, and soul. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The officiating elder hesitated, then continued as though nothing unusual had occurred. I now pronounce you husband and wife. Long live King Alexander and Queen Aurora. The hall erupted in rehearsed cheers as the king raised my hand, his grip firm but not painful. His eyes never left mine, searching for something I couldn't name. The feast that followed was elaborate, course after course of delicacies I'd only heard of, wines from regions I couldn't pronounce. I sat beside my new husband on a dais elevated above celebrating nobles, hyper-aware of his presence, his occasional glances, the careful distance he maintained. My stepmother and Celeste preened at a table of honor, already ingratiating themselves with influential courtiers. Watching them, I realized they'd achieved exactly what they wanted, connection to power without the burden of actually serving it. Your cheek, the king said suddenly, his voice low enough that only I could hear. Someone struck you this morning. I froze, wine chalice halfway to my lips. It was nothing, your majesty. His fingers brushed my jaw, turning my face toward the light. Don't lie to me, Aurora. Not today. Not ever. The gentleness of his touch contrasted with the steel in his voice. Was it your stepmother? I hesitated, then gave a slight nod. Something dangerous flashed in his ice-blue eyes. For what reason? I questioned her about why she offered me instead of Celeste. His jaw tightened. And what was her response? She denied it. Said the arrangement was always for me. A cold smile curved his lips. Interesting. Consider it a wedding gift that I don't have her removed from the celebration for striking my queen. He released my face, reaching for his wine. Though the night is young, I may change my mind. The casual threat sent a chill through me. Please don't. It would only create problems. He studied me over the rim of his chalice. You defend her still after everything. I defend peace, I corrected. And I've had precious little of it in my life. Something shifted in his expression, surprise perhaps or respect. A diplomatic answer. You may make a suitable queen yet. He set down his wine, gesturing to a servant. But remember this, Aurora. You're no longer at anyone's mercy but mine. And I don't share what belongs to me. Dancing followed the feast, nobles twirling in practice patterns. I remained beside the king, watching from our elevated position, acutely aware of whispers, sidelong glances, speculation about what would happen when night fell. They wonder if I can still perform as a man, he observed, bitter amusement in his voice. If my paralysis extends to all functions or merely my legs. Heat rushed to my face. Your Majesty. Alexander, he corrected. When we're alone or nearly so, you'll use my name. Alexander, I repeated, the syllables strange on my tongue. I don't think it's appropriate to discuss such matters here. And where would be appropriate? Our bedchamber, perhaps. His smile was wolfish, predatory. We'll get there soon enough. Before I could respond, a commotion erupted near the entrance. Guards moved swiftly, surrounding a figure who'd apparently tried to force entry. Music faltered. Conversations hushed as the disruption was dragged before the dais. A young man, perhaps 22, with wild eyes and disheveled clothes struggled against the guard's grip. Your Majesty, he shouted, dropping to his knees. I beg an audience. My village, the northern border, we're under attack. Alexander straightened, all traces of sardonic amusement vanishing. Release him, he commanded. Explain yourself. The guards reluctantly loosened their hold. The young man rose unsteadily, bowing low. Forgive the intrusion, Your Majesty. I rode 4 days without rest. The Shadowpaw Pack has crossed the border. They burned our fields, took our children. His voice broke. They said it was payment for your sins. A hush fell over the hall, heavy with tension and fear. I glanced at Alexander, startled by his expression, rage, yes, but also something like guilt flashing before being masked by regal control. When did this occur? He demanded. 6 days ago, sire. I left immediately. Alexander turned to the stern-faced man at his right. Lord Commander Garrett, I'd learned during introductions. Assemble the royal guard. We ride at first light. Shocked murmurs rippled through the assembly. The king hadn't left the palace in 5 years, not since the attack that left him paralyzed. Sire, Garrett began carefully. Perhaps it would be prudent to send. I said we ride. Alexander cut him off, voice brooking no argument. I will not sit idle while my people suffer for my past actions. His gaze swept the stunned nobility. The celebration is concluded. Return to your homes and prepare your men. Any house that fails to answer this call will be considered treasonous. The hall erupted into chaos, nobles hurrying to depart, servants scurrying to clear tables, guards receiving hasty orders. Through it all, Alexander remained composed, issuing commands with the authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed without question. I sat motionless beside him, forgotten in the sudden shift from celebration to crisis. My wedding night, it seemed, would not proceed as the whispers had predicted. When the hall had mostly emptied, Alexander finally turned to me. It appears our wedding night must be postponed, wife. His expression was unreadable. Lady Margaret will show you to the royal chambers. I have preparations to make. You're truly going? I asked, unable to mask my surprise. But your condition, my condition, he interrupted coldly, does not prevent me from leading my men. I've adapted my methods, not abandoned my responsibilities. His eyes narrowed. Or did you marry a man you believe completely invalid? No, I said quietly, my fingers finding the wolf pendant. I married a king I know nothing about, who's sending himself into potential danger on our wedding day. Something softened briefly in his gaze. Death and I are well acquainted, Aurora. He's had 5 years to claim me and hasn't succeeded yet. He reached out, his fingers brushing the pendant. Keep this close while I'm gone. Trust no one. Not your family, not the council, not even Lady Margaret. Why not? Because the attack that crippled me came from within these walls, he replied, voice dropping to ensure only I could hear. And I've spent 5 years determining who orchestrated it. Fear clutched at my heart. And have you determined who? A cold smile curved his lips. I have theories. The Shadowpaw Pact doesn't move without direction, without payment. Someone wanted me weakened or dead. His fingers trailed from the pendant to my cheek, surprisingly gentle against the mark left by my stepmother. Consider this your first lesson as queen. Everyone in this palace has motives you can't yet see. With that cryptic warning, he signaled for his attendants. 2 men materialized from the shadows, helping him navigate away from the dais, leaving me alone on the throne. A new queen abandoned on her wedding day with enemies I couldn't identify and a husband I didn't understand riding toward danger that might have been meant for him all along. I clutched the pendant, my mother's final gift, and wondered if I'd be a widow before I'd truly been a wife. Morning arrived with the thunderous departure of the royal forces. Hundreds of men on horseback, armor glinting in dawn light, banners snapping in the wind. From my chamber window high in the eastern tower, I watched them assemble. Servants scurried between mounted knights, delivering last-minute provisions. Lords in polished armor sat straight-backed atop massive war horses, their expressions grim. At the center stood, sat, my husband of less than a day. King Alexander had exchanged his wedding finery for battle leather reinforced with gleaming plates. Even from this distance, I could see the modifications to his saddle, straps that would secure his useless legs, allowing him to ride despite his paralysis. His determination was evident in every line of his body, as attendants helped him mount a massive gray stallion that pawed the earth impatiently. A knock drew my attention. Lady Margaret entered without waiting, her face arranged in its customary mask of efficiency. Your Majesty, she said, dipping into a perfunctory curtsy. The king requested I deliver these before his departure. She placed a heavy ring of keys on the bedside table, followed by a sealed letter bearing the royal insignia. He also instructed me to inform you that in his absence, you're to attend all council meetings and act with his authority in matters that cannot wait for his return. Surprise must have shown on my face, for Lady Margaret's mouth tightened disapprovingly. The council will not be pleased, she continued. They expect a figurehead queen, not a ruling one, particularly one so inexperienced. I straightened my spine, channeling confidence I didn't feel. Then they'll be disappointed. A flicker of something, amusement perhaps, crossed her features before disappearing. Indeed. The first meeting convenes at midday. I suggest you review His Majesty's letter before then. She moved toward the door then paused. Your stepmother has requested an audience this morning. I took the liberty of denying her until you've had time to settle into your role. Thank you, I replied, genuinely grateful. Don't thank me yet, Your Majesty. I merely follow the king's instructions. Her gaze swept over me, assessing. He left explicit orders regarding your family's access to you. Perhaps you should ask yourself why. With that enigmatic statement, she departed, leaving me alone with the keys and the sealed letter. The wax cracked easily, revealing Alexander's strong, slashing handwriting. Aurora, by now you've been informed of your temporary authority. This is not a gesture of trust but necessity. The council will attempt to manipulate you. Lord Ashford through flattery, Lady Ravencroft through intimidation, Duke Sterling through charm. Trust none of them completely. The keys grant access to my private study adjacent to our chambers. Inside the left desk drawer, beneath a false bottom, you'll find journals detailing my investigations these past 5 years. Read them, memorize them, then burn them. Your stepmother will attempt to leverage your new position for her benefit. Whatever promises you made before our marriage are now void. Remember, you answer to no one but me. I ride to the northern border not merely to address the Shadowpaw threat, but to meet someone who claims to have information about who orchestrated the attack that left me as I am. Should I not return, the information in those journals will be your only protection. The pendant you wear, I've seen it's like before. Ask your mother's family about its origins when time permits. Until my return. I read the letter twice more, then held it to the candle flame, watching parchment blacken and curl into ash, just as he'd instructed for the journals. Outside, a horn sounded, the signal for departure. I returned to the window in time to see Alexander lead his forces through the palace gates, his back straight despite the contraption holding him in the saddle, his crown replaced by a helmet that caught the morning light. For a moment, just before passing beneath the portcullis, he looked up directly at my window as though he'd known I'd be watching. The distance was too great to read his expression, but I raised my hand in a gesture that was neither quite farewell nor blessing. He inclined his head slightly, then turned forward and was gone, swallowed by shadows beyond the outer wall, riding toward danger I couldn't fathom for reasons he'd shared only in fragments. When the last soldier had departed and the courtyard stood empty save for servants resuming duties, I turned my attention to the keys. There were 7 in total, each distinct in shape and size. The largest bore the royal insignia, likely for the study Alexander had mentioned. I found the study exactly where he'd indicated, hidden behind a tapestry depicting a wolf hunt in our shared chambers. The key turned smoothly, revealing a space that felt intensely personal in a way the rest of the palace did not. Maps covered one wall, marked with notes and colored pins. Bookshelves lined another, filled with leather-bound volumes on strategy, politics, and surprisingly medicine. The desk dominated the center, its surface covered with orderly stacks of documents and correspondence. The left drawer opened with a slight creak. The false bottom took longer to discover, cleverly designed to appear seamless. Beneath it lay 4 journals bound in black leather, their pages filled with the same slashing handwriting as the letter. I gathered them and retreated to a chair near the window where light would make reading easier. Hours disappeared as I immersed myself in Alexander's meticulous record of the past 5 years. The first journal began with his recovery from the attack. The pain, the rage, the humiliation of learning his legs would never again support him. His writing in those early entries was almost violent, the pen sometimes tearing through paper with the force of his anger. They think me broken. Perhaps I am, but a broken blade can still cut if wielded with purpose. As weeks progressed into months, his focus shifted from self-pity to cold calculation. He began cataloging every noble who'd visited the palace the week of the attack, every servant who'd had access to his chambers, every guard who might have been bribed to look away. The second journal detailed his theories about who might have orchestrated his attempted assassination. The Shadowpaw Pack, the same group now attacking northern villages, had been the weapon, but someone else had aimed it. Lord Ashford stands to gain the most financially if I die without an heir. His daughter was once promised to me before I chose another path. His pride never recovered. Lady Ravencroft controls the eastern supply routes. She opposed my taxation reforms openly in council. She has connections to the Shadowpaws through her late husband. Duke Sterling presents himself as my closest ally. Yet his ambition is poorly disguised. He commands more men than any other noble. A regency under his control would make him king in all but name. Names and suspicions filled page after page, connections drawn between seemingly unrelated events, a web of conspiracy that expanded with each entry. The third journal, most recent and most disturbing, introduced new theories about foreign involvement, neighboring kingdoms that might benefit from Silvercrest's instability. And then, on the final pages, a name that made my blood run cold. Lord Marcus Winterbourne, my father. Evidence suggests Marcus Winterbourne may have been involved in early planning stages, though he died before the attack was executed. His sudden illness raises questions. Was he eliminated because he developed a conscience or to silence him? His widow remarried with suspicious haste. Her new husband, Lord Caldwell, has connections to the Treasury, access to funds that might have paid the Shadowpaw assassins. Their daughter Celeste was offered as a bride. A transparent attempt to place someone loyal to them in my bed, in my confidence. I chose the other daughter instead. Aurora. The one they tried to hide. The one with her father's eyes and, I suspect, his true loyalty. The pendant she wears, I've seen its match. Marcus wore one identical when we met 6 years ago to discuss the border treaties. He claimed it was a family heirloom with protective properties. Superstitious nonsense, I thought then. I'm less certain now. The journal ended there. The final entry dated just 4 days before our wedding. I closed the leather cover with trembling hands, my mind reeling from revelations that reshuffled everything I thought I knew about my family, my father, my husband. If Alexander's suspicions were correct, my father had been involved in the plot that ultimately crippled the king, but had perhaps tried to withdraw, resulting in his sudden illness. My stepmother and her new husband had continued what he'd abandoned, even attempting to place Celeste as queen to further their ambitions. Instead, Alexander had chosen me, the daughter who'd been sidelined, but who might still carry her father's true loyalties, whatever those had been. And the pendant, my most treasured possession, somehow connected to it all. I clutched the silver wolf, feeling its familiar contours against my palm. Had my mother known of my father's involvement? Had she given me this pendant as mere sentiment, or as something more significant? A clock chimed from the main chamber, startling me. Midday. The council meeting Lady Margaret had mentioned would begin shortly. I returned the journals to their hiding place, locked the study door, and changed into a gown more suitable for a queen facing her first political challenge. The council chamber occupied the west wing, a circular room with high windows admitting streams of sunlight across a massive round table. 6 chairs stood empty when I arrived, with a 7th, larger than the rest and bearing the royal insignia, positioned at the traditional head. Lord Ashford rose as I entered, his white beard neatly trimmed, his eyes sharp despite his advanced age. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing with practiced courtesy that didn't quite reach his expression. "We were not expecting you." "Yet here I am," I replied, moving toward the king's chair with more confidence than I felt. "At my husband's request." Lady Ravenscroft, a severe woman with steel-gray hair twisted into an elaborate knot, made no effort to hide her disapproval. "With all due respect, Your Majesty, these meetings deal with matters of state that require experience." "I'm sure they do," I agreed pleasantly, taking my seat. "Which is why I'm here to learn." Duke Sterling, younger than the others and handsome in a calculated way, smiled with practiced charm. "We are, of course, delighted by Your Majesty's interest in governance." His eyes, pale blue that reminded me of ice over deep water, assessed me with unconcealed curiosity. Though these are troubling times for such education. The other council members, Lord Commander Garrett, recently returned from escorting the King's party to the city limits, and Chancellor Whitmore, a thin man with ink-stained fingers, exchanged glances but remained silent. "I believe," I said, folding my hands on the table before me, "that troubling times are precisely when education becomes most valuable." I met each of their gazes in turn, lingering on those Alexander had specifically named as suspects. "Shall we begin?" The meeting progressed with obvious tension. Reports of border skirmishes beyond the Shadowpaw incursion, treasury concerns about funding the military campaign, diplomatic messages from neighboring kingdoms offering assistance that came with too many strings to be trustworthy. I listened more than I spoke, noting how each council member presented information, what they emphasized, what they glossed over, what they seemed reluctant to address directly. Alexander's journals had provided context I would have otherwise lacked, allowing me to recognize undercurrents in seemingly innocent discussions about supply routes and guard rotations. "There is the matter of your family's new status, Your Majesty," Lord Ashford said as the meeting drew to a close. "Traditional protocol grants certain privileges to the Queen's relatives." "Indeed," Lady Ravenscroft added with false concern. "Your stepmother has already inquired about suitable accommodations within the palace." I kept my expression neutral, remembering Alexander's warning. "My stepmother and stepsister are comfortable in their current residence. There's no need for them to relocate at present." "But surely," Duke Sterling interjected smoothly, "you would want your family close during His Majesty's absence, for comfort and support." "His Majesty is my family now," I replied, rising from my seat to signal the end of discussion. "And I find I'm quite capable of managing without additional support." Frustration flickered across their faces, subtle, quickly masked, but present nonetheless. They'd expected a naive girl they could manipulate, not someone willing to stand firm against their first attempts at influence. As the council members departed, Chancellor Whitmore lingered, approaching my chair with a deferential bow. "Your Majesty," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Might I have a private word?" I hesitated, then nodded, motioning for the guards to remain outside as the chamber door closed. "You should know," he began, eyes darting nervously to the doorway, "that the king values my discretion. I have served as his personal secretary in certain delicate matters. You've helped with his investigations," I surmised, watching his face carefully. Relief flashed across his features. "Then he's told you. Good." I wasn't certain how much he would share before departing. He withdrew a folded paper from his sleeve. "This arrived by messenger this morning. I thought it prudent to deliver it directly to you rather than through usual channels." The paper bore no seal, no identification. Inside, a single sentence written in unfamiliar hand. "The wolf hunts the hunter at moonrise." "What does it mean?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew. "It's a warning," Whitmore replied, his voice tight with anxiety. "The king's contact in the north, the one with information about the assassination attempt, believes they've been discovered. Moonrise refers to 4 nights from now." My heart sank. The king rides into a trap. Whitmore nodded grimly. "So it would appear. I've already dispatched our fastest rider to attempt to intercept His Majesty, but he may not reach them in time," I finished for him. "Or at all if the roads are being watched." "Precisely." I stared at the cryptic warning, feeling the weight of responsibility settle more heavily across my shoulders. Alexander had ridden north chasing answers about who had orchestrated his attack 5 years ago, answers that might implicate my own father, my stepmother, even members of the council I just faced. Now he was heading directly toward those who tried to kill him before, and might well succeed this time. "Chancellor," I said, decision crystallizing as I spoke, "I need you to arrange a private meeting with Lady Margaret immediately, and find someone who can tell me more about this." I touched the wolf pendant. "Its origins, its meaning, anything." "The pendant, Your Majesty?" Confusion creased his brow. "The king believes it's significant, connected to all of this somehow." I tucked the warning message into my sleeve. "And right now, I need every advantage I can find if I'm to keep my husband alive." As Whitmore hurried to fulfill my requests, I returned to the window, gazing north toward the distant horizon where Alexander had disappeared hours earlier. The man I barely knew, the king I now served, the husband I hadn't chosen but who had, for reasons still not entirely clear, chosen me. "Be careful, Alexander," I thought, clutching the pendant that somehow connected us across bloodlines and conspiracies. "The game is more dangerous than either of us realized." Lady Margaret arrived at my chambers as twilight descended, casting long shadows across the stone floors. Her face betrayed nothing of her thoughts as I explained the warning message and my suspicions. "So the king rides into danger," she said when I finished, her tone matter of fact. "This is hardly surprising. His Majesty has never been one to choose the path of caution. Can you help me?" I asked directly. "Chancellor Whitmore says you've been in service to the royal family longer than anyone. If there's information about this pendant," I touched the silver wolf, "or about my father's connection to the king, you would know it." She studied me with narrowed eyes. "Why should I help you? A queen of one day with no claim to loyalty beyond your hasty marriage to a king many believe won't return from this expedition." "Because Alexander trusts you," I replied. "Despite his warnings about trusting no one, he arranged for you to be my primary contact. That speaks volumes." Something flickered in her eyes, approval perhaps. "Very observant, Your Majesty. Indeed, the king and I have an understanding." She glanced at the door, then lowered her voice. "What I'm about to tell you cannot leave this room. Lives depend on it, including potentially yours." I nodded, pulse quickening. "Your father, Lord Marcus Winterbourne, was not merely a minor noble as you've been led to believe. He was the king's spymaster, his most trusted intelligence gatherer and confidant." The revelation struck like a physical blow. My father was a spy? The best in the kingdom's history. He operated a network of informants that extended beyond our borders into neighboring realms. The king relied on his intelligence to prevent 4 assassination attempts before the one that succeeded in part. Her lips thinned. When your father died suddenly, that network fragmented. Some believe it was no coincidence that the successful attack on the king occurred barely 3 months after Lord Marcus's death. I sank into a nearby chair, mind reeling. But Alexander's journal suggested my father might have been involved in the plot against him. A theory the king developed before recovering certain documents, Lady Margaret explained. More recent evidence suggests your father may have discovered the plot and been eliminated because of it. She approached, eyeing the pendant. May I? Hesitantly, I removed the necklace and placed it in her palm. She turned it over, examining the craftsmanship with expert eyes. As I suspected, she murmured. This is no mere trinket. The wolf's head was the symbol used by your father's most elite operatives. The amber eyes represent an operative's child, a potential successor. Her gaze met mine, sharp with new assessment. Your mother gave you this on her deathbed? Yes, I confirmed, voice barely above a whisper. Then she knew. She was preparing you in her way. Lady Margaret returned the pendant. Lord Marcus trained all his top agents to recognize these symbols. If the king noticed it, he would have realized immediately what it signified, that you were your father's daughter in more ways than one. That's why he chose you instead of Celeste. He thought you might have been trained as your father's successor. Were you? She asked. I shook my head, confusion clouding my thoughts. No. At least not that I'm aware of. My father taught me to observe people, to read expressions, to remember details. He said they were games to sharpen my mind. Those weren't games, Your Majesty, Lady Margaret said softly. They were training. Basic tradecraft taught to children with potential. Had he lived, you would have been fully brought into his confidence when you came of age. She straightened. The king must have hoped your training went further than it did. Then I've disappointed him, I said, the weight of inadequacy settling on my shoulders. Perhaps. Or perhaps he saw something in you that you have yet to recognize in yourself. She moved toward the door. I must go. The walls have ears, and we've spoken too openly already. Wait, I called after her. You haven't told me how to help the king. She paused, hand on the latch. If His Majesty rides into a trap, what would you have me do? Send soldiers after him? That would only alert his enemies that the trap has been discovered. There must be something, I insisted. Some way to warn him, to help him. Lady Margaret studied me for a long moment. Your father had safe houses throughout the kingdom, places where his agents could seek refuge, exchange information, regroup when necessary. If any still exist, they would be listed in his personal records. Which would be where? That, she replied with the ghost of a smile, is something only his successor would know. After she departed, I paced the royal chambers, frustration mounting with each turn. My father had been the king's spymaster. I had been unwittingly trained in basic espionage techniques. The pendant marked me as a potential successor to his network. And somewhere, my father had hidden records that might contain information about safe houses where Alexander could seek shelter if warned of the trap. But where would such records be kept? Not in our family home. My stepmother had ransacked every corner after his death, searching for valuables. Not in his business offices. Those had been sold to cover debts that I now suspected were fabricated. I touched the pendant, remembering my mother's words. As long as you wear this, I am with you. Had she meant more than maternal sentiment? Had she been trying to tell me something about the necklace itself? With trembling fingers, I examined the silver wolf more carefully than I ever had before. The craftsmanship was exquisite, the metal seemingly seamless. But as I applied pressure to different points, I felt a slight give near where the amber eyes connected to the wolf's head. A hidden mechanism. Heart racing, I pressed harder. With a faint click, one of the amber eyes detached, revealing a tiny compartment within the wolf's skull. Inside lay a tightly folded piece of parchment, no larger than my thumbnail. Carefully, I extracted and unfolded it, revealing a sequence of numbers and letters written in my father's distinctive hand. N52E18 Thornwood Forest, Ancient Oak Grove, third tree from center, hollowed base, iron key. Coordinates and instructions for finding something hidden. But how could I possibly reach them in time to help Alexander? A knock at the chamber door interrupted my thoughts. Chancellor Whitmore entered, his thin face drawn with anxiety. "Your Majesty, forgive the intrusion. There's been a development." He glanced nervously over his shoulder before continuing. "The rider we dispatched to warn the king never left the city. He was found in the stables with his throat cut." Cold fear gripped my heart. "Then we have no way to warn Alexander." "Worse," Whitmore continued, voice barely audible. "I've received word that Duke Sterling has been sending private messages to the northern borders for weeks. Messages that coincide with reported Shadowpaw Pact movements." "He's the traitor," I whispered, pieces falling into place. "It appears so. And with the king gone and the royal guard accompanying him." Whitmore didn't need to finish. "The palace was vulnerable. I was vulnerable." "Chancellor, I need a map of the kingdom," I said. "The most detailed you can find, with latitude and longitude markings." He looked puzzled but nodded. "Of course, Your Majesty, but may I ask why?" "Because I believe I know how to find my father's records," I replied. "And they may be our only hope of saving the king." The map arrived within the hour, a massive, meticulously drawn representation of Silvercrest and its surrounding territories. With trembling fingers, I located the coordinates from the hidden note. They marked a location deep in Thornwood Forest, not far from our family estate. A place I'd visited often as a child. "The old oak grove," I whispered, memory surfacing. "A place where my father would sometimes disappear for hours. He called it his thinking place. I'd assumed it was merely a retreat. Now I understood it had been much more." "Your Majesty," Whitmore looked confused. "I know where we need to go," I said, decision crystallizing. "And we must leave tonight." "Leave the palace?" Alarm colored his voice. "That would be extremely dangerous. Duke Sterling has men positioned throughout the city. If he realizes you've discovered his betrayal, then we must ensure he doesn't realize it," I interrupted. "I need a trusted escort, minimal and discreet. We'll travel under cover of darkness." I studied the map again, calculating distances. If we ride hard, we can reach the location by dawn, retrieve what we need, and still have time to send warning north. Whitmore looked torn between duty and fear. "The council will object to your departure." "The council doesn't need to know," I countered. "Not until we're gone. And if Duke Sterling attempts to seize power in your absence, prepare copies of the king's private journals," I said, thinking of the evidence hidden in Alexander's study. "Have them ready to be delivered to every noble house in the kingdom should anything happen to me." I met Whitmore's anxious gaze. Mutual assured destruction. If Sterling moves against me, his complicity becomes public knowledge. Understanding dawned in the Chancellor's eyes, followed by reluctant admiration. "Your father would be proud, Your Majesty. You have his strategic mind." "Let's hope I have his luck as well," I replied grimly. "We leave in 2 hours. Tell no one but those directly involved in our departure." As Whitmore hurried away to make arrangements, I changed into riding clothes hidden beneath a hooded cloak. The pendant returned to its place around my neck, its secret compartment resealed, its weight both familiar and newly significant against my skin. By midnight, our small party, myself, Chancellor Whitmore, and 5 trusted guards, slipped through a servant's gate into the sleeping city. The night wrapped around us like a protective cloak as we navigated narrow streets toward the eastern gate. Stars glittered coldly overhead, offering just enough light to guide our way without revealing our presence to watching eyes. The city fell behind us, giving way to open countryside that we crossed at a gallop. Thornwood Forest loomed ahead, dark and forbidding in the moonless night. I led our group along paths I remembered from childhood, praying my memory wouldn't betray us. Dawn was breaking as we reached the coordinates, a clearing where ancient oaks stood sentinel, their massive trunks twisted with age. I dismounted quickly, counting trees from the center as my father's note had instructed. The third tree's base showed signs of hollowing, though skillfully concealed by moss and undergrowth. My fingers found the opening, reaching into darkness until they closed around cold metal. An iron key, just as promised. "Wait here," I instructed the others, dismounting. "Keep watch. If anyone approaches, signal immediately." The key felt heavy in my palm as I examined the ancient oaks more carefully. One tree, larger than the others, bore faint markings near its base. Runes or symbols I didn't recognize. Pressing along the patterns, I felt a section give slightly under pressure. A click followed by the whisper of wood sliding against wood as a hidden panel opened in the tree's base, revealing a narrow passage descending into darkness. I lit a torch from my saddlebag and descended carved stone steps that led deep beneath the forest floor. The passage opened into a small chamber, surprisingly dry and well-preserved. Shelves lined the walls filled with documents, maps, coded ledgers, the heart of my father's intelligence network, preserved and hidden for whoever might follow in his footsteps. Among the documents I found what I sought: a map marking safe houses throughout the kingdom, including 4 near the northern border where Alexander's forces would be headed. There was more, much more than I could possibly absorb in limited time. Pages detailing suspected traitors within the court, including damning evidence against Duke Stirling, correspondence suggesting my father had indeed discovered the plot against the king shortly before his death, and a letter addressed to me, sealed with wax bearing the wolf insignia. I tucked the letter into my bodice for later, gathering the most crucial documents: the safe house locations, the evidence against Stirling, the coded communications that might still be active. "Your Majesty!" Chancellor Whitmore's urgent whisper carried down the passage. "Riders approaching from the south." I quickly gathered everything I could carry, extinguished the torch, and hurried back up the stone steps. At the surface, I sealed the hidden panel and mounted quickly. "How many?" I asked, joining Whitmore at the tree line where he watched the approaching dust cloud. "At least 15, he replied grimly. "Flying Duke Stirling's banner." My blood ran cold. How did he find us so quickly? Someone at the palace must have betrayed our departure. "We're outnumbered." Whitmore's expression darkened. "If they catch us." "They won't," I interrupted, mind racing. "We split up. You take these." I thrust the documents about the safe houses into his hands. "Ride north as fast as possible. Find the king. Warn him about the trap. Tell him about the safe house at Silver Peak. It's closest to his likely position. And you, Your Majesty? I'll lead the others east toward my family estate. Stirling will assume I've gone running to my stepmother." I patted the remaining documents hidden in my cloak. "I have what I need to expose him when the time comes." Whitmore hesitated. "It's too dangerous. If something happens to you, then the journals you prepared will ensure Stirling falls with me," I finished for him. "This isn't a request, Chancellor. It's an order from your queen." Something shifted in his expression, respect perhaps. He bowed his head. "As you command, Your Majesty. May the gods protect you until we meet again." We mounted quickly, our party splitting as planned. I watched Whitmore disappear into the northern tree line before leading my 5 guards eastward, making certain we were visible enough to be spotted by Stirling's approaching men. "Ride hard," I instructed my escorts. "Make them believe we're fleeing in panic." The chase began almost immediately, Stirling's men altering course to pursue us, exactly as I'd hoped. We thundered across open fields, leading them farther from Whitmore's escape route with each passing minute. But Stirling's men were gaining, their horses fresher, their determination fueled by whatever rewards their master had promised. As we approached a river crossing, I made another split decision. "Continue east," I ordered 4 of the guards. "Make it obvious. Draw them away." To the 5th, the youngest, barely more than a boy, I handed a sealed document I'd hastily prepared using evidence from my father's cache. "Take this to Lady Margaret. Tell her to deliver copies to every noble house if I don't return to the palace by nightfall." Fear and determination warred in the young guard's face. "What about you, Your Majesty?" "I'm taking a different path," I replied, turning my horse toward a narrow trail that led south through dense underbrush. "Now go, all of you." They obeyed without further question, the 4 decoys thundering eastward across the river, drawing most of Stirling's men with them. The 5th slipped away northwestward, taking a circuitous route back toward the capital. I urged my horse down the nearly invisible trail, branches whipping against my cloak as we plunged deeper into the forest. Behind me, I heard shouting as Stirling's men split their forces, having spotted my diversion. At least 3 riders were now in pursuit of me, crashing through the undergrowth with little attempt at stealth. The trail narrowed further, forcing me to slow my pace. My horse snorted nervously, sensing my anxiety as the sounds of pursuit grew closer. The path descended sharply, following a stream that cut through rocky terrain. Ahead, the trees thinned, revealing what I'd been searching for. A waterfall cascading into a deep pool surrounded by moss-covered boulders. Another childhood memory, another of my father's thinking places, that I now recognize for what it truly was, an escape route. Dismounting quickly, I removed my cloak and draped it over a branch extending over the pool, evidence for my pursuers to find. With a sharp slap to its flank, I sent my horse galloping onward deeper into the forest. The shouts grew closer as I slipped behind the waterfall, finding the narrow passage my father had once shown me. In case of emergency, he'd said. Some secrets aren't meant for sharing, Aurora. Except with those you would trust with your life. Water soaked my clothes as I squeezed through the opening into a small cave beyond. I pressed deeper into the cave system, guided by fading memory and desperate hope. The sounds of pursuit were lost beneath the rush of falling water. The passage twisted, narrowed, then opened into a larger chamber where a small boat lay hidden beneath an oilcloth covering. The underground stream would carry me away from danger, to a fishing village if I navigated correctly, where I might find allies among those who still remembered my father with loyalty. As I uncovered the boat, my fingers brushed against something carved into its wooden seat. A wolf's head with amber eyes. My father's legacy guiding me still. Behind me, muffled voices echoed from the cave entrance. Sterling's men had found the passage. With no time to lose, I pushed the small craft into the dark water and climbed aboard, surrendering to the current that pulled me into the unknown. Whether I would reach the king in time, whether Whitmore would successfully deliver his warning, whether I would survive to see Alexander again, all remained uncertain as darkness enveloped me. But one thing had become crystal clear. I was indeed my father's daughter, and I would fight with every skill, every resource, every ounce of courage I possessed to protect the kingdom he had served and the king I had married. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more captivating tales of romance, intrigue, and unexpected destiny. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Now let's continue Aurora's journey. The underground river carried me through darkness for what felt like hours, its currents alternating between gentle glides and heart-stopping rushes through narrowed passages. My world contracted to immediate sensations, the cold water occasionally splashing over the boat's edge, the scrape of stone against wood when the tunnel walls drew too close, the distant drip of water marking the passage of time. When light finally appeared, a pale blue glow ahead that gradually strengthened, I felt as though I was being reborn. The tunnel widened into a cavern where the river slowed, flowing peacefully toward an opening partially concealed by a curtain of trailing vines. Beyond them, daylight beckoned. I guided the small boat through the natural curtain and emerged into late afternoon sunshine. The river joined a larger waterway that curved through a meadow dotted with wildflowers. In the distance, smoke rose from chimneys, the fishing village I remembered from childhood visits with my father. My clothes had nearly dried during the long journey underground, but I still presented a disheveled appearance as I steered toward a weathered dock where several fishing boats were moored. An old man looked up from mending nets, his weathered face registering surprise as I approached. "Well now," he said, helping secure my boat with gnarled hands strong despite their age. "Been a long while since anyone came down the old escape route." His eyes narrowed with assessment. "You've got Marcus's look about you. His daughter, are you?" I nodded, surprised by the recognition. "Aurora. Thought as much. He spoke of you often." He glanced around cautiously before continuing. "Word spread about your marriage to the king. Other things too, men asking questions, offering coin for information about any strangers passing through." He helped me onto the dock. "Come. You'll be wanting Eliza's place. It's safe there." He led me through the village, taking a circuitous route that avoided main pathways. Curious eyes watched from windows and doorways, but no one approached or called out. The atmosphere felt charged with unspoken tension. Eliza proved to be a stern-faced woman of middle years, whose expression softened almost imperceptibly when my guide mentioned my father's name. Her cottage sat apart from the others, surrounded by a garden of herbs and flowers that provided both beauty and privacy. "Marcus's girl," she said, ushering me inside. "We wondered if you'd ever find your way here." She bolted the door behind us. Timing is either blessed or cursed, depending on how you look at it. What do you mean? I asked as she bustled about, setting water to boil and laying out bread and cheese on a scarred wooden table. King's forces passed near here 3 days ago, headed for the northern border. She cast me a pointed look. And yesterday another group followed. Men without banners, moving silent as shadows tracking the king's path. My heart sank. How many? 30, maybe more. Well armed. Not Shadowpaw pack. Too disciplined for those forest rabble. She placed a steaming mug before me. Drink. You look half drowned and fully exhausted. I sipped the herbal brew. Its warmth spreading through my chilled body. I need to get word to the king. He's riding into a trap. Eliza exchanged glances with the old fisherman. Thomas might help with that. His grandson's one of the fastest riders in the region. Thomas nodded. Boy knows the forest paths better than the royal scouts. Could reach the king's camp by midnight if he leaves now. Hope flickered to life within me. I can pay well for his service. The king's gratitude would be substantial. No need for payment, Eliza said firmly. Your father saved my husband's life once. Called in favors to get him pardoned after he was caught up in that smuggling business 12 years back. Her eyes softened with memory. Said everyone deserved one mistake without paying for it forever. Thomas slipped out to find his grandson while Eliza provided clean clothes and a place to wash the cave dust from my skin and hair. By the time I emerged, feeling somewhat restored, a message had been drafted and a young man with alert eyes stood ready to deliver it. Tell no one but the king himself, I instructed, pressing the sealed note into his hand. And give him this as proof of who sent you. I removed my pendant, placing it atop the message. The silver wolf felt like a missing limb as I released it, but Alexander would recognize it immediately. The safe house at Silver Peak is his best refuge. Chancellor Whitmore should already be headed there with detailed directions. The young rider nodded solemnly. I won't fail you, Your Majesty. As he departed, Eliza drew me to the cottage's rear window. Now, about your return to the palace. Is it possible? I asked. Duke Sterling's men will be watching all the main roads. Main roads aren't the only ways to travel, she replied with a hint of smugness. Your father made sure of that. Come nightfall we'll see you safely on your way. Though the journey won't be comfortable. She was right. Traveling by hay cart along forgotten farm tracks, switching to a merchant's wagon hidden beneath bolts of cloth, then transferring to a royal laundry delivery, each transition orchestrated by people who spoke my father's name with reverence, I gradually made my way back toward the capital through the night and following day. It was approaching dusk of the second day when the palace finally came into view, its tower silhouetted against the setting sun. Lady Margaret waited at a servant's entrance, her face revealing momentary relief before resuming its usual impassive mask. Your timing is fortuitous, Your Majesty, she said, ushering me through back corridors. Duke Sterling has called an emergency council meeting for this evening. He claims to have evidence that you fled the kingdom, abandoning your duties. He means to declare himself regent in the king's absence. Let him try, I replied, clutching the documents I protected throughout my journey. I have evidence of my own. I bathed and changed quickly, donning a gown of midnight blue that lent me authority my travel-worn appearance had lacked. Lady Margaret arranged my hair, skillfully concealing the shorter strands where I'd cut a lock to include with my message to Alexander. The council gathers in the East Chamber in 1 hour, she informed me, securing the final pin. I took the liberty of summoning several loyal noble houses to attend as witnesses. Duke Sterling will find it difficult to dispose of you with so many eyes watching. Good, I said, meeting her gaze in the mirror. And the documents I sent with the young guard? Distributed to key allies as instructed. Should anything happen to you, Duke Sterling's treason becomes common knowledge by morning. Determination steeled my spine as I made my way toward the council chamber. Flanked by guards, Lady Margaret assured me remained loyal to the crown. The evidence against Sterling felt heavy in the hidden pocket of my gown, a weight balanced by the righteous anger that had been building since I discovered his betrayal. I paused outside the chamber doors, hearing voices raised in debate within. Taking a deep breath, I nodded to the guards, who threw the doors open with ceremonial precision. Her Majesty, Queen Aurora Thornwood, announced the herald, voice carrying over the sudden silence that fell. Duke Sterling stood frozen mid-sentence, his face draining of color as I entered. The other council members displayed varying degrees of shock and, in Lord Ashford's case, poorly disguised disappointment. "Forgive my delayed arrival," I said, moving to the head of the table with measured steps. I was attending to matters of kingdom security that required my personal attention. "Your Majesty," Sterling recovered quickly, his charm sliding back into place like a well-worn mask. "We feared the worst when you disappeared without notice. There were reports of violence, abduction." "How fascinating," I interrupted, taking my seat. "Especially since the only violence was perpetrated by men bearing your personal insignia, Duke Sterling. Men who pursued me after you somehow learned of my discreet departure from the palace." Murmurs rippled through the assembled nobles. Sterling's smile tightened. "I dispatched men to search for you, Your Majesty, out of concern for your safety. If they acted overzealously, they acted on your orders," I stated flatly. "Just as the Shadowpaw Pack acted on your coin when they attacked the northern villages. Just as they did 5 years ago when they left my husband paralyzed." The chamber erupted in shocked exclamations. Lord Ashford half rose from his seat. "These are serious accusations, Your Majesty. Do you have evidence for such claims?" In answer, I removed the documents from my gown and placed them on the table. Financial records showing payments from accounts controlled by Duke Sterling to known Shadowpaw intermediaries. Correspondence intercepted between the Duke and pack leaders. And testimony from one of his former lieutenants who had an attack of conscience after the last assassination attempt. Sterling's charm evaporated, replaced by cold calculation. Fabrications and forgeries. Who would believe the desperate claims of a girl forced into marriage, seeking to carve out power for herself? "I would," came a deep voice from the entrance. All heads turned toward the doors, which had opened silently to reveal King Alexander Thornwood, still in his travel-stained battle leathers, his wheeled chair pushed by a grim-faced Chancellor Whitmore. Around his neck, catching the lamplight with familiar gleams of silver, hung my pendant. The room fell utterly silent as Alexander wheeled himself forward. His ice-blue eyes locked on Sterling's face with predatory focus. "Your Majesty," Sterling managed, his complexion ashen. "We did not expect your return so soon." "Clearly," Alexander replied, his voice dangerously soft, "though I imagine you expected no return at all." He continued toward the table until he reached my side. His hand found mine beneath the edge of the table, fingers intertwining with surprising gentleness given the fury evident in his expression. "Thanks to my wife's warning, I avoided the ambush laid for me at the northern pass," he informed the stunned council. "Instead, I took an alternate route to intercept the Shadowpaw Pack leaders, who proved quite informative once properly motivated." Lord Ashford cleared his throat. "The pack attacked." "The pack followed orders," Alexander corrected sharply. "Orders paid for by gold that originated in Silvercrest's own treasury, diverted through clever accounting that required access only Duke Sterling possessed as Minister of Finance." Sterling's hand moved subtly toward his belt, where I glimpsed the outline of a concealed dagger. Without thinking, I slammed my own hand down on his wrist, pinning it to the table. "Guards," I called calmly, maintaining my grip despite Sterling's attempt to break free. "The Duke appears to be armed in the presence of the King. A serious breach of protocol, wouldn't you agree?" Guards moved swiftly to restrain Sterling, who abandoned all pretense of innocence. "You should have died in that attack," he snarled at Alexander. "A crippled king is a mockery of what Silvercrest deserves. And yet this crippled king managed to outmaneuver you at every turn," Alexander replied evenly. "With significant help from his queen." His thumb brushed across my knuckles in a gesture both possessive and appreciative. "Take him to the dungeons. We'll determine his full list of conspirators before his execution." As Sterling was dragged away, hurling threats and accusations that fell on deaf ears, Alexander turned to the remaining council members. "This session is adjourned. Lord Ashford, Lady Ravenscroft remain. We have matters to discuss regarding your potential knowledge of these events." The chamber emptied quickly, leaving only the 4 of us and a pair of trusted guards. I made to withdraw my hand from Alexander's, but his grip tightened, keeping me anchored to his side. "Your Majesties," Lord Ashford began nervously, I assure you, I had no knowledge of Duke Sterling's treasonous activities. A claim we will investigate thoroughly, Alexander replied. For now, you are both relieved of your counsel duties pending that investigation. Lady Ravencroft's face tightened with anger, but she offered a stiff bow before departing. Lord Ashford followed with considerably less composure. When the doors closed behind them, Alexander finally released my hand, turning his wheeled chair to face me directly. For a long moment, he simply studied my face, his expression unreadable. You saved my life, he said finally. You chose me for a reason, I replied. I simply proved your judgment sound. A smile, the first genuine one I'd seen from him, briefly softened his features. He reached up to remove my pendant from around his neck, holding it between us. Your father wore its twin. Did you know that? I nodded. I've learned much about him these past days. He was a good man. Loyal to the crown, to the kingdom. Alexander's fingers traced the silver wolf. When I received your warning with this attached, I knew I could trust it completely. The daughter of Marcus Winterbourne would not use his symbol falsely. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my face with unexpected tenderness. You're like him in many ways. Observant, resourceful, brave beyond reason. His hand lingered against my cheek. But you're also entirely yourself, Aurora. A queen who proved her worth within days of wearing the crown. Something warm unfurled in my chest at his words, at the respect evident in his gaze. I did what was necessary. You did what few would have dared, he corrected, lifting the pendant. May I? I turned, allowing him to fasten the necklace around my throat, his fingers brushing the sensitive skin of my neck in a touch that sent shivers down my spine. The familiar weight of the silver wolf settled against my skin, comforting in its return. There is much still to do, Alexander said as I turned back to face him. Sterling's conspiracy likely extends further than we yet know. The Shadowpaw Pact remains a threat to be neutralized. And the Council requires restructuring with members we can trust. We'll face it together, I replied with newfound confidence. His ice-blue eyes studied me with an intensity that made my breath catch. When I chose you as my bride, I sought a political alliance with Marcus Winterbourne's daughter. A strategic decision to acquire your father's loyalty and resources. His voice dropped lower. I did not expect to find a partner, an equal. Nor did I expect to find purpose in a marriage forced upon me, I admitted. Or to discover strength I didn't know I possessed. Alexander took my hand again, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. The question becomes, what do we do with this unexpected development? A king and queen who might actually be well matched beyond political convenience. We rule, I said simply. We rebuild what Sterling and his conspirators sought to destroy. We make Silvercrest stronger than it was before. And us? He asked, vulnerability briefly visible beneath his usual control. What becomes of us, Aurora? I considered the man before me. Damaged yet undefeated, hardened by betrayal yet capable of trust. A king who had recognized my potential when even I had failed to see it. Not the monster my stepmother had described, but not a simple man either. Complex, challenging, worthy of respect. And perhaps in time worthy of more. We begin again, I suggested, squeezing his hand gently. Not as strangers forced together by circumstance, but as allies who chose each other knowingly. We learn each other. We build something real from an arrangement that started as false. The intensity in his gaze softened slightly. A courtship after marriage. Unconventional. We seem to excel at unconventional approaches, I pointed out with a small smile. He laughed then, a rich, genuine sound I'd never heard from him before. Indeed we do. His expression grew serious once more. I cannot promise to be an easy husband, Aurora. The damage done to me goes beyond my legs. There are dark days when bitterness consumes me, when rage at what was taken threatens to overwhelm reason. And I cannot promise to be a pliant, agreeable wife, I countered. I have discovered a spine of steel these past days, and I don't intend to surrender it, even for my king. I would not want you to, he replied immediately. Your strength is what saved us both. A comfortable silence fell between us, filled with new understanding and possibilities neither of us had imagined days earlier. Outside, the sun had set completely, stars emerging in a clear night sky visible through the high windows. Your stepmother and stepsister have fled the city, Alexander informed me, breaking the silence. They departed shortly after news spread of Sterling's arrest. I felt a curious detachment at this information. The women who had dominated my life for years suddenly seemed insignificant, reduced to footnotes in a story that had expanded far beyond their influence. Let them go, I decided. They've lost everything they schemed for. That's punishment enough. Alexander nodded, approval evident in his expression. Merciful. Your father would be proud. I hope so, I said softly, touching the pendant. I've only just begun to understand his legacy. A legacy you'll continue in your own way. Alexander wheeled his chair slightly back. I should allow you to rest. You've endured much these past days. As he turned to leave, I found myself unwilling to end our conversation. This first real connection between us, forged in crisis but promising something more lasting. Alexander, I called softly. He paused, looking back over his shoulder with a raised eyebrow. Thank you, I said, for choosing me, for seeing something in me that I couldn't yet see in myself. His expression softened, ice blue eyes warming with an emotion I couldn't quite name but felt answering within my own heart. Thank you, he returned, for proving me right. 6 months later. I stood at the same window where I had watched Alexander ride away on our wedding day, though everything else had changed. The kingdom had stabilized under our joint rule. His experience complementing my fresh perspective, my diplomatic approach balancing his more forceful tendencies. The council, restructured with trusted advisors including Chancellor Whitmore and Lady Margaret, functioned smoothly. The Shadowpaw Pack, deprived of their leadership and Sterling's financial support, had dispersed or sworn fealty to the crown. And my relationship with Alexander had evolved in ways neither of us had anticipated that first night when we began anew behind closed doors. We discovered each other slowly, carefully. His damaged body still capable of tenderness, my cautious heart gradually opening to possibilities I'd never imagined when forced into marriage at 18. Love had grown between us. Not the instantaneous passion of fairy tales, but something deeper, more resilient, built on respect, tested by challenges, strengthened through shared purpose. I felt his approach before I heard it, the subtle shift in the air that always accompanied his presence. His wheeled chair stopped beside me, his hand finding mine with the easy familiarity we'd developed. What has captured your attention so completely? He asked, following my gaze to the courtyard below where spring flowers had begun to bloom. The future, I replied, resting my free hand instinctively on my abdomen where the first signs of our child had begun to show. How different it is from anything I imagined when I arrived here as your reluctant bride. Alexander's hand joined mine over the gentle swell that promised the air he'd once thought impossible. Regrets? He asked, the question light but underscored by the vulnerability he now allowed me to see. I turned from the window to face him fully, taking in the face that had become beloved in its every expression, from the intensity that could intimidate hardened warriors to the gentleness reserved only for me in our most private moments. Not one, I answered truthfully, bending to press my lips to his in a kiss that still held the power to make my heart race despite its familiarity. When we parted, his ice blue eyes held mine, filled with the same wonder I felt at what we'd created together. Not just the child we would welcome in the coming months, but the partnership neither of us had sought yet both had needed. Nor I, he murmured, drawing me onto his lap with practiced ease. Though I admit, when they brought me the pale, terrified girl in a borrowed wedding dress, I never imagined I was meeting my match. And I never imagined my prison would become my freedom, I replied, settling against him with the comfortable certainty of belonging. Or that the man I was forced to marry would become the one I would choose above all others. Outside, spring continued its relentless renewal, healing the scars of winter just as time had begun to heal the wounds we both carried. The future stretched before us, uncertain in its details but secure in its foundation, built on the strength we'd discovered in each other and in ourselves. Not a perfect ending, for our story was far from over, but a perfect moment in an imperfect world. A moment of peace, hard-won and therefore all the more precious. A moment I had earned step by painful step from the day I became a reluctant bride to a broken king and discovered that sometimes the deepest wounds can lead to the greatest healing if we have the courage to face them together. Want more stories like this? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads. Drop a comment below telling us what you thought of Aurora and Alexander's journey, and check out our playlist for more royal romance tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.